In the world of professional sports, some players have the ability to just transcend the game in which they play. Some products, they seem like a great idea at the time, and some, they seem like they'll be around forever. Now in my day, I've seen quite a few busts, but the one type of bust that would be good right now is for you to bust a move, head down, click the subscribe button. That way you can stay up to date for all the PARC uploads. This is Clay with the Pennsylvania Rollercoaster Club, and today I want to take a special peek at my top 10 list of roller coasters that left me quite underwhelmed. Starting us off at number 10, we have the Morgan Hypercoaster Mamba at Worlds of Fun in Kansas City, Missouri. This shares an identical layout with two cloned rides, one at Valley Fair and one at Dorney Park, Wild Thing and Steel Force respectively. Now, the one thing about this one in particular that is the reason that made it land at number 10 on this list is that mid-course brake run. Boy, oh boy, does this thing hit that trim brake hard. And for that reason, and that reason alone, it finds itself at 10. Number 9, we gotta go all the way out to the West Coast to Six Flags Magic Mountain. And yes, that's right, that is Full Throttle. This Premier Rides launch coaster, it is an awesome ride. Features a pretty punchy launch, has a pretty cool swing launch element to it at about the midway point of the ride. And the reason that it has to be on this list is when you're coming over that final airtime hill, you are expecting great airtime and a pretty exciting second half of a ride. But the only problem is once you start heading down the other side, you realize you're just headed straight for a brake run. And yeah, half of a ride kinda. Moving on, number 8. Fury 325 at Carowinds. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. How could this possibly be on this list? Well, quite simple. My expectations were through the roof. And I had ridden this mid-afternoon for my very first ride, and boy, it was crawling through the second half of the layout. And what I had come to find out was that you really do need to let this thing warm up. The first couple hours of the day, I have had less than inspired second halves of my rides for Fury 325. Moving on to number 7, going back to Worlds of Fun, and this time for Zamy Zinger, the most recent addition to the park. And again, this is a fun ride. Every ride that is on this list is a good ride and a fun ride. It's just what were the expectations upon how did it deliver? And the expectations that I had was that this was going to be a pretty good family coaster that was smooth and fun and maybe a little bit of airtime, a little low to the ground speed. And I mean, I guess there's a little bit of airtime and there is some good low to the ground speed elements, but it is not very smooth. You know, I had ridden this weeks after it had opened and not very smooth at all. Moving on to number 6. This is really a tie. You have Superman Ride of Steel, not just at Six Flags America, but also at Six Flags Darien Lake. And this ride, man, I had so many high hopes for this ride. And really, it's a ton of straight track, a bunch of helix, and some under-delivering airtime hills. And if that is your cup of tea, if you love under-delivering airtime hills and you love way too many, way too long of drawn-out helixes, this is your ride. Moving on, number 5. Going to Six Flags Great America in Gurnee, Illinois for Raging Bull. And this is probably going to be pretty unpopular with some of the Raging Bull fanboys, and truthfully, I didn't even realize that there was such a thing as a Raging Bull fanboy, but I sit corrected because apparently a lot of people love this ride, and I'm sorry guys, I just don't get it. This was built around the same time as Apollo's Chariot, except, Apollo's Chariot is, it's better. I'm sorry, but it just is. Raging Bull just kind of does nothing. It was relatively forceless, and I didn't even find it to be particularly intense on the low to the ground sections. I don't know. Maybe I'm just missing it. Maybe you guys can help me in the comment section below and help me understand why people love this ride so much. It's just mid at best. Number 4. We are going back out to the West Coast, this time to Knott's Berry Farm for Accelerator. Now I understand this was the very first Accelerator model, and I should cut it some slack, and no, I'm not cutting it any slack. All I've heard about for the last several years is how this is so good and so forceful and so intense, and I'm sorry, it's just a worse version of Storm Runner. The launch is not any more forceful than Storm Runners at all, and the layout is pretty weak and inspiring after the top hat. I know this was first, but doesn't make it good. Number 3, going to Superman Ride of Steel. This one in Six Flags New England, and this ride, I just don't get it. This has won the golden ticket so many times for best steel roller coaster in the world, and hey, look, maybe at one point in time this was a pretty good ride, but not anymore. These restraints are awful. These U-bricks are possibly the worst restraint system known to mankind in the coaster community. They are that bad. But even with good lap bars and good restraints, I'm still not 100% sure that this was worthy of winning all of those golden ticket awards. And, for me in the last several years, the golden ticket awards were actually cheapened in part, not just from, this ride, but for some other questionable decisions. For instance, the number 2 ride on this list, Phoenix at Knoebels. Now, yes, this is the Pennsylvania Roller Coaster Club, and yes, we do love Phoenix, and yes, we do love Knoebels. All of those things are true. However, one more thing is true. If it weren't for the buzz bar restraints and absolutely insane airtime from not having seatbelts, this ride would be mid at best. The layout is very uninspired, but it does have that great airtime with no seatbelts and buzz bars. And that pretty much is the calling card of this ride, guys. There is not much special about it, which is why I was pretty disappointed. But it cannot even hold a candle to my number 1. My biggest disappointment. The most underwhelming coaster that I have ever ridden. So much so that after I got off, I thought that maybe it was broken. That maybe I did something wrong when I rode it. I was confused. I didn't know if maybe that was only half the ride, or if they were running it in slow mode. It didn't make sense to me why so many people had this rated as their number 1 roller coaster overall. And now, granted, maybe it was way better with the launch, but I cannot envision it being 30 or 40 times better with the launch, and that pretty much is what it would require for it to be that high on my list. This ride is barely and maybe, and I will say this again, barely and maybe in my top 100. and if it is in the top 100, it's going to be towards the lower 25. I don't know. I find it to be poorly paced. I don't find the airtime to be particularly forceful, and I don't think that it's very fast. I think the scenery is absolutely gorgeous, and I betcha if you pair this with a great launch, man, I betcha this really was the bee's knees. But for me, it was the most disappointing. But guys, let me know in the comments below, what do you think? You agree with my list? What are some of your most underwhelming rides that you've ever had? As always, please don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and until next time, guys, we'll see you out there.